Welcome to the Lion of Judah Discipleship Journey Seminary in the Christian Church of God from Jerusalem.
As a recap from part 1 of this seminary series, we talked about the location of Haran in ancient Syria or modern-day Turkey. This is why Abraham and Jacob were regarded as Syrian Aramean from Deuteronomy chapter 26 verse 5, as the original Hebrews using cuneiform writing script. Before going into Egypt, after the Hebrews entered Egypt, what wound up happening was that they began to learn the language of Egypt, and this was before Moses. And so by the time Moses winds up getting them out of Egypt, at the Exodus period, and getting into Judges, there is a new kind of Hebrew script that was being used during this time period, and we call this the Egyptian Sinai script. Now, some scholars believe that this Egyptian Sinai script was a slave script that the slaves of Egypt had developed for communications while they were in Egypt, and as the Exodus from Egypt. See how the forms of some of these letters are still easily seen in the Egyptian Sinai script. You can use an Egyptian hieroglyphic dictionary to see that this Hebrew Egyptian Sinai script developed from the Egyptian hieroglyphs. Now, interesting, the succeeding kings of Egypt, most of which occurred between 1457 and 1425 BC, conquered Palestine and Syria to make Egypt a great power. And this same area was also called today the Levant, and it was considered entirely the promised land also to be given to Israel, according to Genesis 15:16. When compared to other scripts, my Hebrews did not use this Egyptian Sinai script for very long. It was by comparison a very brief time of usage. We can see that it was about 500 years. The next major script that the Hebrews used was a Phoenician type script, from about 1200 BCE to 600 BC. This covered a time period from about the time of the Judges until the end of the divided kingdom approximately. Now, the Phoenician alphabet was actually a combination of both the Egyptian Sinai script and cuneiform writing. This made it somewhat familiar and popular among the Mesopotamian scribes and the Egyptian scribes, and Phoenician became widespread as more and more people became familiar with it, and encountered it. The Sinai Egyptian script and the Phoenician script are often called by biblical scholars a Paleo Hebrew, or meaning a very old and ancient type of Hebrew. But keep in mind these scripts for actually foreign scripts, foreign language, writing systems. The original Hebrews were actually cuneiform Hebrew. And while this is Egyptian Sinai and Phoenician considered ancient Hebrew text, it is only because the people of the Hebrew culture were utilizing this form of writing during the time period outlined in the general timeline. It is this Phoenician Hebrew that is often discovered in archaeology and published in journals and other forms of Hebrew archaeological digs. Now, of particular interest is this artifact here at the bottom, which you can see is partially the Phoenician script, and what is emerging to be the Hebrew script that we're familiar with in the Bible. This is probably the oldest representation of the transition between the Phoenician script coming into what is called Old Aramaic. This is a stone that is preserving Old Aramaic. Now in this photo, there is what some are describing as the Rosetta Stone for the Hebrew, which is showing side by side in the letters of the Phoenician script. And then you have the Old Aramaic, which became the Imperial Aramaic in the center. And then what we consider the Bible Hebrew, which came from the Imperial Aramaic. And recall from the timeline that Imperial Aramaic was used around 600 BC. As the what we are calling Hebrew arose around in gradual transformation beginning from about 300 to 200 BC. The Hebrew alphabet did not become identifiable as distinct from Imperial Aramaic until after 200 BC. Slightly different shapes of letters occurred gradually until fixed sometime during the 1st century AD. So generally speaking from around 600 BC until about 300 BC, Imperial Aramaic was used by the Hebrews, that form of script. And this script came under some modifications after 300 AD to the modern Hebrew and Bible Hebrew that we often see. Now the Bible Hebrew had not yet developed long vowels, or vowel point systems, which were later influenced by the Greek and Tiberius, and as well as later writings from Germans, and Spanish and other countries. Now, after the Kingdom of Israel had split up, the southern Kingdom of Judah started to utilize the Aramaic script, as used by the prophet Daniel. And there were some Jews in the north in Samaria, which had become highly pagan and corrupt according to the Old Covenant. They appear to perhaps continued a type of Phoenician script, Hebrew, called the Samaritan script, and the evidence, as far as archaeology is concerned, may date this to about 500 BC. And there is still controversy around it because it appears in some ways to be an attempt to recreation of the Phoenician Hebrew script, or to mimic it, or perhaps even be a derivative of it, as a regional dialect. And the Samaritan script itself does seem to represent some Greek influence, in terms of being an impure abjad, having acquired long vowels from the Greek dialect and letter usages. Now the earliest Semitic languages were pure abjad, meaning that all the letters of the alphabet inventory are all consonants, only consonants. There are no long vowels in pure abjad. Any Semitic language that has developed the long vowels from the Greek influence is in pure abjad, and especially the vowel point system that was first originated by the Greeks and utilized by some Semitic languages, much later. If this Sumerian script is genuine and authentic, then it would likely reach back to about 900 BC, and would become about that time indistinguishable from the Phoenician Hebrew script that the Hebrews used. And so this concludes our history lesson about the scripts that were used by the Hebrews. And just a few final notes, and concluding here, there are some that might decide, well, we need to start learning the Phoenician, or we might need to start learning the cuneiform. But the problem with this is that many modern scholars are using their foreign vowel system in their own native language, and trying to interpret these older languages based on the rules and principles of their own modern vowel-filled languages. They use letters or consonants with long vowels, and this complicates things. And sir, I would not recommend getting into the studies of these ancient languages that were pure abjad scripts, and do so without some really good firm understanding of the consonantal structure that are involved in scripts that are pure abjad or pure consonant scripts. Additionally, when it comes to Sumerian, that is, of ancient location of Ur in Summer of Abraham, when it comes to that form of script, it is so old. And the Akkadian that was in use around Cation of Haran, and those kinds of cuneiform, they are so old, and not being used for so long, that you also have scribes and scholars that are in conflict about the actual alphabet inventory, or whether it's read from right to left or left to right. There are a lot of areas there that still needs to be deeper studied and affirmed before one can actually make some good determinations about what letters meant what, and before we can even truly interpret some of the cuneiform writings in a more faithful way to their original abjad form. And even if we had that, it would be a lot of irrelevance compared to what we have today. In terms of studying the Bible, the only thing we have left faithfully of the Hebrew culture from the times of Christ is preserved in the Hebrew script of the Bible era Aramaic as it was transitioning to later square script Hebrew. As a pure abjad, any Bible era Hebrew of Christ would have a lot of the principles of the Imperial Aramaic from which it came from, and during the time of the Bible writing such as Daniel and the last prophets in the Bible, sometimes called the minor prophets, because of the small books they wrote. This would have been a type of Hebrew that would have been using the principles of Imperial Aramaic when it comes to the consonantal structure of words, and even the language particles. Language particles are letters used or added to a root word in Aramaic or Hebrew, when pure abjads, to give the root word additional detail qualities. And this can be something that one should keep in mind before concerning themselves with Hebrew and the study of the words for biblical purposes. Now, the Strong's Concordance or Dictionary of the Bible in Hebrew and Imperial Aramaic tends to give us root words, and has taken off the language particles, the parts of the words that represent words like way. The Strong's Concordance Dictionary is more like a glossary for the Bible's main words, the main words in the Bible. So for the next segment of this lesson, we are going to be focusing on the Imperial Aramaic and the Bible era Hebrew, which is actually an Aramaic type of script. If you liked this Lion of Judah Discipleship Journey Seminary video, please click the like button and subscribe to get future informative videos.